Hello and welcome to Power BI for Beginners. In this video series, I'm going to walk you through going from raw data to a near finished report or dashboard. We're going to be focusing on the basics. We're not going to go super deep into some of the more advanced topics. These videos are mostly to show you the steps in creating a Power BI report so that you understand how to go from raw data to the end of a report, and we'll fill in those more advanced topics in future videos. So if you're brand new to Power BI or wanting to get into Power BI, these are the videos for you. Let's get started. Alrighty folks, let's get started on our Power BI report walkthrough video series. So the first thing we're going to need to do is open Power BI. Now when you open Power BI, you're going to get a page that looks like this. If you're opening the Power BI desktop app, it's going to say select a data source to start with, a blank report, and you also have several different options to connect data to it. OneLake, Excel, or SQL Server. There's many more different types of data connections you can make, but for this video series, we're going to go with the Excel workbook. Now, I'm going to click blank report on this one because I want to show you some of the things, but you could start with just clicking the Excel workbook and linking your data that way. But we're going to click blank report this time. So when the blank report shows up, you'll notice there's this big section in the middle that says add data to your report. There's many menus all across the page, on the left, on the top, on the right, some page tabs on the bottom. There's all sorts of stuff to interact with. We're going to go through some of it in this video series, not all of it. So let's get your data into this report. Now, if you've downloaded the Excel sheets from my website, you can start following along. We're going to import those Excel sheets into our Power BI desktop app right now. You can click import data from Excel right here, or you can click it right here. You can also click the Get Data button, and that will give you the entire list of options that you can use to get data. So there's all kinds of different databases and data connectors that you can use to bring in data. That's one of the most powerful things about Power BI, is that you can connect all sorts of different data into one model and use it to create one dashboard. You'll notice the Excel workbook is listed right here as well. So I'm going to click that one. I'm going to go ahead and click connect. And here is my Power BI demo files folder in my downloads. I'm going to click the sales Excel sheet, and I'm going to click open. And then it's going to start connecting to that data. It's going to pop up the navigator menu, and it's going to show you the file that it's connected to. It's going to show you the spreadsheet that it's connected to. Now, if this spreadsheet had tables assigned inside it, like you can do in Excel, it would also show you the tables that it would find in that spreadsheet. So we're going to click on the spreadsheet that it found. And you'll notice that we have our date, our item code, quantity sold in kilos, our unit selling price in RMB per kilogram, and sale or return, discount, yes or no. It's going to tell us all of the fields and show us some of the values that it found in those fields. Now, normally we might click transform data at this point to start cleaning up our data before we bring it into our model. Since I'm going to add another sheet, I'm just going to click load this time. It's going to load all that data into the model. And loading data into the model like this is called an import query. It's the only way you can do an Excel sheet, but there is also called a direct query. We'll do a video specifically to that. But just so you know, import query means we're going to import all the data into our file and into our model. So if you imported a ton of data, the file can get quite large. Direct query is going to go straight to the source, mainly a database, and it's going to query it every time that you refresh your visuals here. And we'll discuss that in another video. But if you come over here to data, on the side, you'll see sales, and if we pop it down, you'll see all of your fields or columns. So we have our date, discount code, item code, quantity sold, sale or return, and unit selling price. So we have our data in the model. We're going to grab the other Excel sheet. So we're going to come up here and click Excel workbook this time. And I'm going to grab the categories Excel sheet, and I'm going to open. Again, it's found a sheet within the Excel file. We're going to click that, and we have our item code, item name, category code, and category name. And a moment ago, we clicked load, but now I'm not going to add any more data, so I'm going to click transform. And this is going to open up the Power Query Editor. And the Power Query Editor is one of the most powerful phases in building a Power BI report. Between this and DAX measures and calculated columns, maybe also relationships, Power Query Editor is incredibly powerful at cleaning up your data, making it usable. Now you can also get to the Power Query Editor by clicking Transform Data on the sort of main home menu on your primary Power BI app. So what we're going to do in Power Query Editor is we're going to clean up our data. You can do all kinds of things. You can make transformations on these tables. You can change values. You can change data types. You can do all kinds of things. And we're going to start on our categories. You can see that it's so long it's not showing the entire number in its original form here. If we look at our columns, we've got item code, item name, category code, and category name. And so since this is grocery store data, we have item code, which corresponds to the item name. These are obviously types of food items. And then we have a category code that each item falls into, and the category name. So if we look, this category code here is the same as this category code, and they're all flour / I'm guessing what should be leafy vegetables. And then they all have the name, but the item code will be specific to each item. It's our primary key. And a primary key in a table is a column, usually the first, that does not repeat. So every single value is unique or distinct. So the local spinach here, down here, this item code is only used for this item. It ties this number to local spinach, whereas this number is repeated and used for all of the flour / leafy vegetable categories. Whereas this number is repeated and used for every item that falls into the flour / leafy vegetable category. And once we get into our data, you're going to see how powerful it's going to be having a table that gives us a category and a code tied to the items and their code, because we're going to relate these two tables together on item code. Now, you'll notice this number is extremely long because it didn't even show the whole thing. We could change this to a text field. Now, if I click change, you'll see that it says replace current or add a new step. It's referring to these applied steps over here, because when it brings in a new data source and you want to make transformations or modifications to it, it's going to show you all the steps that you've done to it over here. And it does some on its own when you first bring in the data. Kind of like the Adobe products do with kind of your history of what you've done to the file. This does the same kind of thing. Now what it's saying right now is, I already figured out this was a number and I changed it to whole number. Do you want me to just replace that step that I already did? Or do you want me to still do that and then add a new step that changes it to text? I'm going to add a new step for this one because I'm probably going to change it back. So add a new step, change type 1. We have changed the item code to text. And it'll tell you in this little code bar up here, table, transform column types, change type, item code, type text. So we've changed this column to text. And there are some potential advantages and disadvantages to changing this to text or whole number. Numbers take up less space, so your model doesn't get a lot bigger, but text will also hold your leading zeros. If your item code has any zeros in front of it, number will get rid of them, so it kind of actually messes up your item code if it has leading zeros. Also, if you know in your data that potentially some item codes have letters in them and some item codes have numbers in them, then you might want to have it as text. Now, if it had letters in it, then Power BI is probably going to already kind of pick that up and would have had it as text or any. So that's some things to consider. I'm going to go ahead and delete this step since I know that all these are numbers. We're going to delete that step, leave it as a number, takes up less space in the model. We have our item name, which looks fine. Now you can investigate your data through the Power Query Editor, like by doing things like this. If you click this little drop down here, it will show you the different distinct values in this table. So you can see here's all the individual items that we have. You can even do the same for category name. It'll show us all of the individual categories. So there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories in this entire table. And this table is 251 rows long, we can see right down here, but we only have 6 individual categories. You can also sort descending or ascending. You can apply filters, like say we only wanted to see cabbage. We could do that. If we push OK, it's going to only show us the items for category name cabbage. Now, if you do that and leave it this way, when you click close and apply, which applies these transformations to your data, it will only give you this, because as you see in our applied steps, it says filtered rows, meaning it has now filtered out everything that's not cabbage. So I'm going to delete that step and go back to our full table here. Another thing we can do is notice that I said flower/leafy vegetables, because I'm assuming this should be leafy, because the other ones don't have any sort of odd spelling like that. So something either got corrupted or just messed up in the data at some point for this, but we can fix it. So if we click on the column that we want to try to adjust here, we can either right click and click replace values, or we can come up to our top menu here and click replace values right here. So I'm going to click replace values. Now it's going to ask us what to find and what to replace it with. Now if we just put this accented A, then if anything else had an accented A but wasn't the word leafy, then it would replace it with a Y. So I don't want to do that. I want to be a little bit more specific. So I'm going to put leaf and then that accented A, and I'm going to replace it with leafy. And then when I click OK, you'll notice it changes all of them accordingly. So that's another cool thing we can do to clean up our data. Now we could even merge different queries together. We can do inner, outer joins. We can concatenate queries together. We're not going to get into that on this video. We're going to keep it kind of short, but you can sort of bring in multiple tables and join them all together if you needed to in Power Query. That's how powerful it is. So we're going to jump back to our sales table here. And in our sales table, you notice we have our date, our item code, our quantity sold, unit selling price, sale or return, and our discount, yes or no. Now, another thing that's common in Power Query is, let's say sales is named something wonky or kind of weird, and you needed to clean up your data sources over here to know which one each is. You can right click and click rename, and that will rename the query. And in the model as well, when you go back to your main page, it will also keep whatever you've named it here. So if you need to rename your queries, you can do that here as well. Now you can also rename columns. So if we wanted to go and change date to like sale date, we could right click it and we can click rename, and we could put sale date and then hit tab, and we've changed our column or field name here, and it will keep it once you click close and apply. Now item code is again that identifier of the individual items over here. Now it's not the primary key of this table. There isn't a primary key of this table because this is our fact table. And if you look into Power BI or look up data modeling, you're going to find fact and dimension tables. And a fact table, which is what this is the main data that you're going to be analyzing. In this case, sales data. We have our sales date, what item was sold, what the quantity of it that was sold, or the weight essentially. Then we have the price per kilogram that was sold, and whether it was a sale or return, and whether it had a discount applied. I'm assuming that's what that means. So this won't have a unique identifier because you could have multiple sales, obviously, on the same day. You could have multiple sales of the same item on the same day. So there isn't a field here that can't repeat. You could have lots of different repetitions. Now, a dimension table, like categories, is a table that gives us more insight to the main data. Basically, what this does is it takes that item code and says, for each item code in this table, this item is what it is. So we have a 251 row table that tells us what each item is and gives us a category that each item falls under. This is really useful because we don't have to store thousands and thousands of rows of item name, category code, and category name in our main table. We can keep all that extra stuff out and just link everything by item code. That's another huge benefit of these data models, is that you can use dimension tables to give yourself information about the main fact table, the main things you're going to analyze. Also, you'll notice that Power BI already figured out this is a date data type, this is a whole number, This is a decimal number, and so is this. And then these two are text. These look fine. Everything should be good to go here. So for our data in this example, we're not going to make any huge transformations. So one more cool thing I'm going to show you in Power Query is we can actually create a new column based off of our existing columns here. So let's look at unit selling price. And let's say we wanted to create a new category of sorts. We wanted to say, well, we want to have a low, medium, and high selling price for each sale, whether that falls into a low sale, a medium sale, or a high sale. So what we can do is we can come over here to add column. And there's several different types you can do. You can column from examples, custom column, invoke custom function, conditional column, all kinds of stuff. You can duplicate a column. You can merge columns, all sorts of things. What we're going to do is we're going to create a conditional column. We're going to click that. We're going to name this one sale category. And we're going to start our condition logic with if the unit selling price is less than 5. Let's make sure here. Yeah, so less than 5. Then the output is going to be low. We're going to add another clause here. If unit selling price is less than 10, we're going to say medium. Then our else clause down here is going to be high. So if it doesn't fall within either of those two categories, then it's going to be high, meaning over 10. Now, if we click OK, you'll notice that it has created our other column, and it has clearly identified low, medium, and high. Now, if we go back to our logic, which you can do on this added conditional column step, you can click the little gear icon, and it'll bring back up how we did it. You might think we just said everything less than 5 is low, everything less than 10 is medium. Well, everything in the low category is also under 10, so why isn't it calling it medium? That's because it operates one at a time. So it will go through the entire data set and say everything under 5 gets categorized as low. Then it'll go back through what's left, what hasn't gotten categorized, and it'll say everything under 10 is medium. And then it will leave the else statement for last and say everything else that wasn't categorized gets high. So that's something important to remember, that if you're creating these logics, it's going to go one at a time. And so you can create the first one, and it will go through and apply all those steps. And then you can have the second one, it'll apply what's left, and so on. I'm going to click OK. So now we have a new column in our data that didn't exist before, and it gives us more information about our data that we didn't have before. More analytical power, essentially. So now, to finalize all of our transformations, everything that we've done, we are going to go back to home, and we're going to click close and apply. And this is going to apply all of our transformations and everything we've done to our queries in the Power Query editor. And it will take a moment to reload the data in with all of your transformations. And then once it's done, you'll see your data on the side over here. And if we pop this down, you'll see all of your field names. So under categories, you have our category code, name, item code, and name. Then sales, discount, yes or no, item code, quantity sold, sale category, sale date, sale return, and unit selling price. You'll notice these little symbols next to some of your fields. Basically, Power BI is trying to assume how you might want to summarize this data. So if you click on a field, you'll notice up here it goes to column tools on your top menu, and it'll tell you what column you're working with. And summarization right here, it says sum. So it says, hey, this is a number. Do you want me to just add them up when you drag them over into something? I like to keep mine as don't summarize. That way everything's kind of even, and I can apply whatever aggregations I want to them without anything else kind of interfering. So I make sure all of mine say don't summarize. You'll see there's a little calendar by that because it's recognized this is a date. It's just telling you, hey, this is a date format. Other than that, we have brought in our data and we have transformed it. So we are now ready to move on to relationships. And to get to your relationships, you're going to go over here to the left under model view, which you have report view, which is what we're in now, where you're looking at the main report you're building. You have table view, where you can look at your data. So there's our categories table and our sales table. This is so you can look at or vet your data while you're making your different calculations or aggregations. You can kind of go back and check your work against your data if you need to. You won't have a table view if you do a direct query. And again, I'm going to make a video about that later, but this is only for import models because direct query does not have the data stored in the report itself. So you can't do that in a direct query. Then if you go to model view, this is where we can set up our relationships. And you'll notice that Power BI, if we drag this categories over, has already found one. So for our sales data, which is our fact table, it has already figured out, if we drag our mouse right here, that item code lines up on both tables. Power BI looked at both tables and said, for every item code in sales, there is a corresponding one over here in categories. So it went ahead and made that relationship for us. I'm going to delete it so that we can make our own and you can see how that works. So when we are working with the model view of our report, this is our fact table. This is sales, which is going to be the main data that we are analyzing. And again, this is one of our dimension tables, so it gives us information about our fact table. Now you will hear people, or if you're going to take the Power BI PL300 test, you will probably get asked about a star schema. Now a star schema is basically when you come to model view, it is telling you how all the tables are related. So basically, our fact table is usually somewhere kind of in the middle, and then our dimension tables surround it. So our categories, if we had another dimension table to give us more information about items, or in a moment when we create our calendar auto table, we're going to use that as a sort of dimension table as well. And if we had any other dimension tables that told us anything, like say we had other information about sales or returns that we wanted to use in our data from another table, we would link it on sale or return. For our star schema, I'm going to drag sales into the middle to make it clear that this is our main fact table. This is the data that we're going to be analyzing. And then I'm going to drag, there's actually a couple different ways you can create a relationship. I'm going to show you both. You can drag the field that you want to relate over to the other one and lay it over the top of the field you want to relate it to. If you let go of it, it will create a relationship. I'm going to push cancel because I want to show you the other way to do it as well. You can also come up here to manage relationships. And you can click new relationship. You can also click auto detect, which is going to do the same thing that it did earlier when we first created this. Found one new relationships, which has been added to the semantic data model. Close. And it has created that, again, the same relationship it created earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that so you can see how to make one manually. We're going to click new relationship. From table, we're going to go categories. So this is our category table, and we're going to relate it to the sales table. And we're going to do item code. So we've selected item code. You can change it, but we're going to go off item code to item code on the sales table. Then our cardinality. Power BI will figure this out automatically when it creates its relationships. But on this one, it says one to many. Now what that means is this table, the one side of the relationship, means that item code is distinct. There is only one of each value in this table. Now this one says many, meaning that item code is repeated in this table. It is not distinct. One to many is the primary cardinality for all star schemas and creating all sort of data models. There's also one to one, many to one, which means the other way. Now, if we try to go many to many, first of all, it won't do it on this one because this isn't many. And it'll also give you warnings because many to many does not behave the way that a one to many does. And it will cause you lots of issues in creating your report if you aren't very familiar with how many to many operates and if you're not using sort of data that requires that relationship. And most of the time you won't be using data that requires that relationship. So then we can set up our cross filter direction. What this means is when we apply a filter in our data, in our report, like a slicer or click on a row or click on a visual and it starts to filter our data, do we want this table to be able to filter this table and this table filter this table, or do we only want it to go one direction? Single means that this table will be able to filter this table, but if we slice up data in our sales table, it won't filter back the other way. So for now, we're going to leave it as single, meaning that categories is going to filter sales, but sales cannot filter categories. So we're going to click save, and that's going to create our relationship. We can close our relationships little panel there. And now we have the first step in our star schema. We have our fact table and our dimension table. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, and this is a great habit to get into, anytime that you have date fields in your model, and most of the time you will, because Power BI is insanely useful for time intelligence. It's one of its most powerful features is being able to compare analysis and aggregations over time, like year over year, month over month, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to create our own separate table from these that's going to keep track of our dates. And to do that, we're going to come up here to where it says New Table. We're going to click it. This is the code editor. We're going to use DAX to create this. I know this is the first time I've even mentioned DAX in this video, but I'm going to create a second video that goes more into DAX and how to learn it. But for now, you can just copy what I'm writing until you've kind of gotten really familiar with DAX and how it works. So to create our calendar table, we're going to select this code editor up here, type in date equals, and as I start to type, you'll notice it's going to try to guess. I'm typing calendar, and it says, oh, do you want calendar or do you want calendar auto? For this one, I'm going to click calendar auto. It's going to open parentheses. Now, this parentheses is mainly used on calendar auto to tell Power BI if you use a different fiscal year than January to December. So if you use a different fiscal year, this is where you could tell Power BI what month counts as your first month for the year. We're going to assume we just use a normal fiscal year of January to December. So we're going to close our parentheses, and that will just generate it as normal. And we're going to hit enter. And now we have a date table, and it is going to count as a dimension table for our sales data here, because what we're going to do is we're going to drag date over to sale date, and we're going to create a relationship. So again, look at this. Since our sales data does not have a primary key like we discussed earlier, every field in this data could have duplicates, because you could have sales that occurred on the same day. You could even have multiple sales of the same item that happened on the same day. So you don't have a primary key here. So what we're going to do is use our date table, because date only has each date once. It counts up all the dates only once, and it starts from the very first date in your model. So if we had other tables that had dates in them as well, this would start at whatever the first date of any of them was. The cool thing about a date table is it only shows each date once. So now we have a key, a primary key, like we wanted in our dimension table over here. So when we drag it, it says from date table to sales table, and it's a one-to-many, meaning each date's only represented once here, has many over here, and that's good. That's what we want. One-to-many, single cross-filter direction, save. And now we have sort of two legs of our star schema. If we had more dimension tables to add, we would add them down here, and then that would give us sort of a star shape, and that's where star schema comes from, is branching out these dimension tables from our fact table. And what it does is tells anyone else who comes into your data model, that tells them, hey, this is the fact table, this is the data we're analyzing, and here's our dimension tables. It tells people how your data is structured and how your model is structured so that they can better utilize it. Now, before we move on to analyzing our data, we're going to do a couple more things in this relationships phase that's going to make your life easier once you get into analyzing your data. And the first thing we're going to do is come up to our date table. We're going to right-click it, and we're going to click Mark as Date Table. I click that. It's going to pop up another little window here, and where it says Mark as Date Table, we're going to click On, and we're going to choose our date column, and we're going to click Save. Now, this what this does is basically just makes this the primary date column for our entire model. It just makes some of the calculations that Power BI does easier. It streamlines some of the back-end processes. Really, it's just going to save you time, especially in larger data models, and it makes it more clear where your date identity is coming from. Now, second, with our date table still selected, we're going to click New Column. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create some more columns under our date table that are sort of related to date, but it's going to let us analyze our data a little more and dive into certain date aspects. So what we're going to do is we're going to type year, and we're going to go equals year. And as you type, IntelliSense is going to try to figure out what you're trying to type. So we have a bunch of functions here. We're going to find the one that says year, and you can either hit tab with it selected, or you can just click it, either one. Now, when it opens its parentheses like this, it's asking what column do you want me to extract the year from. So to tell it, we're first going to identify the table. And we're going to do that by typing an apostrophe. And it's going to suggest date, the date table. And it also suggests an individual column. So date and the column date. So if I hit tab under this one, it fills it in with the date table. And then it assumes that I want the date column, which is the square brackets. So if I type square bracket, it's going to assume the date column. And then to finalize this, I'm going to close my parentheses. And now what this is going to do when I hit enter is it's now going to extract only the year from the date. So if we go up to our table view up here, you can now see that in our date table, it has extracted the year from every single date row in this entire table. And this is going to be really useful here in a moment when we get into breaking into our data and analyzing it. There's another thing that's going to be extremely useful, and we're going to add that now. We're going to click on our date table again, and we're going to click new column, and we're going to type month number. And we're going to put an equal sign, and we're going to type month. And once it guesses, and it's going to highlight month, you can hit tab. Then we're going to tell it what table we want. We're going to hit an apostrophe, and we can go down to date and tab and close our parentheses. And what this is going to do, if you come up here to your table view, is going to give us the month number. So if we see this is January, it gives us month number 1. If we go down to 11, it gives us month number 11. This is also going to be extremely useful. Now there's one more column we're going to create before we're done with our date table. And we're going to come back to our date table, click new column, and this time we're going to go month name. We're going to click equals, and we're going to type format. And we're going to hit tab. Again, we're going to tell it the table by hitting an apostrophe, and we're going to go down to date, hit tab, but this time we're going to put a comma. You'll notice that it tells you format, value, comma, format, comma, locale name. And it converts a value to a text in the specified number format. So basically, we're converting the date column into a text field. And we're going to put quotes, and we're going to put MMMM. And what that'll do is give us the month name if we close the quotes and close our parentheses and hit enter. And those are capital M's, by the way. It's going to give us the month name. Now, little tip for you. What I like to do is go back, and I like to remove one of these M's and just leave it as 3. And if we hit enter there, it's going to instead be just an abbreviated month. Now you might say, why do you want to abbreviate the month? You'll find that once you start using this in visualizations that go month over month, having the entire month written out takes up a lot of space on your visualization, and it has a much easier time looking clean and uniform if you have just 3 character month abbreviations. But if you check this out, now we have our month number and our month name extracted from our date. So what we can do with this later on is say, I want to know all the sales trends for every February. Well, you'd select February in your filter, and we would only get sales data from February regardless of year. So you could see all Februaries or all March. Or if you wanted to see sales over time, like if you wanted to have a line graph that's had sales for 2020, we would go by month name, and it would show you up and down how the sales went across the months. Now, this brings us to another important thing we got to do for our date table here, and this is going to be the last thing we're going to cover before we go on to analyzing it. It's important that when you create a month name column, you need to sort it by this month number. That's why we created the month number. Because if you don't, it's just going to go by like highest to lowest or lowest to high, ascending or descending. Like if you created a visualization that was month over month, by January, February, and so on, if you don't sort this by the month number, it'll just go by whatever is the highest. So if March was your highest sales, that'll be the first one, and then December, and then January. Just depends on how the numbers came out. It won't sort it by the month number. It'll sort it by the amount of whatever measure you're using. So we're going to click our month name, and we are going to go sort by column. And we're in our table view here. We're going to go sort by column, and we're going to click month number. So now our month name will always sort by month number. So it'll always be in chronological order if you use it in a visualization. Now I said that was the last thing. We are actually going to do one more thing. We're going to go back to our model view. This is just something I like to do for my stuff. I like to come here in my model view and come over to my data and pop out all of my fields here. And I'm going to click this one. I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to come down here and highlight all of them. And then under display folder, I'm going to put columns. And I'm going to hit tab. And now you'll notice that we have a folder under our data that has columns. And the reason I'm doing this is because in a moment we're going to start creating something called measures. And they are not columns, but they're based on columns. And so I want to be able to distinguish my measures from my columns a little bit easier just by looking at them. And I'm going to do this to all of them. I can go to my date. It's not quite as important to do it to your date one, but we can. We're going to do that as well. Highlight all of our columns. Under display folder, type columns and hit tab. Then under my sales one, I'm going to do the same. And I'm going to put columns and hit tab. And now we have a columns folder for each table in our data model. And for now, we're kind of done creating our relationships. We've imported our data, we've cleaned it up, and now we have set up our relationships and created our star schema. We are now ready to go back to our report view and start analyzing data.